Marcus Hale believed he had rebuilt his life after his ex-wife took almost everything. He was a structural engineer, steady, quiet, the kind of man who fixed things without being asked. His ex-wife had taken the house, the savings, and alimony when she left, and he had rebuilt slowly, without complaint. So when Simone walked into his mother's funeral with another man, dressed like it was a dinner party, sitting in the front row like she still belonged somewhere in his life, Marcus did not move, did not flinch, just watched. What neither of them knew was that Evelyn Hale, a woman who had spent her life cleaning other people's homes and clipping coupons, had left behind a substantial estate, and the will was about to be read in the next room. Marcus knew something they did not, and he had been waiting a long time to let them find out. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Marcus's apartment was not much, but it was clean and organized, a reflection of how he had rebuilt his life after Simone took almost everything. The evening light filtered through vertical blinds, casting long shadows across the beige carpet. As he sat at his small dining table, phone in hand, Denise perched on his worn leather couch, her usual energy subdued by grief. She had arrived shortly after he called with the news about their mother. "The funeral home needs an answer about the viewing hours," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the hollow feeling in his chest. He glanced at his notepad where he had been tracking details. "I'm thinking evening and morning before the service. That works." Denise nodded. Mama would want it simple, no fuss. Marcus made another note. The funeral home director had been patient, understanding that Marcus needed to work through each decision methodically. It was how he handled everything: careful consideration, then decisive action. "Have you heard from anyone else in the family?" he asked Denise. "Most of the cousins. Aunt Marie is driving down from Charlotte." Denise hesitated. "And?" "Simone called me." Marcus's pen paused mid-word. "Called you?" "Yeah. Not you, me. Said she was so sorry to hear about Evelyn and wanted to know about arrangements." Denise's tone carried a note of suspicion. "Felt strange, her reaching out to me instead of you. Everything about Simone was calculated," Marcus said quietly. He remembered how she had strategically built relationships with his family during their marriage, positioning herself as the devoted daughter-in-law while simultaneously pushing him to spend beyond their means. The years they had been married played through his mind like a PowerPoint presentation, each slide revealing another financial drain: the house they could not afford, the car leases she insisted on, the vacations charged to credit cards. He had taken extra engineering consulting work, stretching himself thin while she spent. "Remember how she used to talk about investing in their lifestyle?" Denise asked, shaking her head. "Right up until she invested in Victor Langford instead," Marcus replied. The words held no bitterness, just fact. He had discovered the affair before the divorce was final. Emails, hotel receipts, a pattern of business dinners that were not business at all. But Marcus had said nothing, simply documented everything. When divorce proceedings began, he used that leverage during settlement negotiations, not for revenge, but to limit further damage. Still, Simone and her attorney had engineered maximum extraction. The house, liquid assets, alimony that had finally ended months ago. Marcus had rebuilt from there, turning his engineering expertise to side projects that slowly replenished his savings. "I need to iron my suit for the service," he said, standing. His mother had taught him to always look presentable regardless of circumstances. In his bedroom, he removed his dark suit from the closet. As he shook out the jacket, something fluttered to the floor, a folded piece of paper. His mother's distinctive handwriting covered one side. "Marcus, baby, when the time comes, do not let anybody rush you. Sit still. Everything I have done is in the black binder. I love you. Mama." The note was from months ago. Marcus read it twice, then set it carefully on his dresser. He did not know what black binder she meant, but something in his chest tightened at the deliberate tone of her words. He plugged in the iron, waiting for it to heat. Through the bedroom door, He could hear Denise on the phone with more family. The sanctuary continued filling. More neighbors, church members' lives. Evelyn had touched without fanfare. Minutes before the service was set to begin, a familiar click of heels drew his attention. Simone entered through the main doors, Victor Langford at her side. She wore a fitted black dress that spoke more of fashion than mourning. Accented with pearl earrings, Marcus remembered buying her for their anniversary. Victor sported a crisp charcoal suit with a pocket square. Jamal tensed beside Marcus as the pair made their way down the center aisle, settling into the second pew, the section reserved for family. Simone arranged herself gracefully, while Victor's eyes swept the sanctuary with the calculating gaze of a man assessing property value. Marcus felt Jamal's anger building and touched his cousin's arm lightly. A small shake of his head was all it took. Jamal understood, though his jaw remained tight. The service itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Pastor Richardson spoke about Evelyn's quiet strength, her unwavering faith, her service to others. Then Sister Margaret from the women's ministry stepped up to share something that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Many of you did not know," she began, "but for years, Evelyn Hale had been the anonymous donor behind our Young Women's College Fund. And by fountain, every semester she provided scholarships for 2 young sisters to pursue their education. She never wanted recognition. She just wanted them to have their chance." Marcus sat very still, absorbing this new information about his mother. He had known she was generous, but this spoke of planning, of resources he had not imagined she had. At the repast, people filled plates and shared memories. Marcus was speaking with Mr. Wilson when Simone approached, her expression a masterpiece of practiced sympathy. She touched his arm with familiar presumption. "Marcus, I'm so sorry about Evelyn. She was always so special." The pause was subtle but deliberate. Behind her, Victor stepped forward, hand extended. "Sorry for your loss, brother," Victor said, his tone carrying the easy confidence of a man who had never faced real consequence. His handshake was firm, a businessman's handshake, meant to convey authority. "Thank you for coming," Marcus replied simply, his voice neutral. He watched them move through the crowd, noting how Simone touched people's arms, leaned in close, played her role of grieving former daughter-in-law. Jamal appeared at his elbow, speaking low. Victor just photographed the program, got real interested in that attorney information at the bottom, sent some texts right after. Marcus observed Victor's casual stance by the punch bowl, phone still in hand. "I see him." Jamal's muscles bunched under his suit jacket. "Want me to?" "Not yet." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. His mother's note about sitting still echoed in his mind. There would be time for movement later. Right now, observation was enough. The funeral home's private family room felt smaller than its actual dimensions, with the dark wood paneling and tasteful beige chairs arranged in a semicircle. Warren Klein, Evelyn's estate attorney for years, stood by a polished conference table, arranging documents with methodical precision. His silver-rimmed glasses caught the afternoon light as he checked his watch, right on schedule. People filed in quietly. Denise sat closest to the table, hands folded in her lap. Jamal positioned himself near the door, his broad shoulders filling the frame as Simone and Victor approached from the hallway. "Family only," Jamal said, his voice low but firm. Victor opened his mouth to object, but Simone touched his arm, a practiced gesture of restraint. She had perfected that move during her marriage to Marcus, always positioning herself as the voice of reason. "I was Evelyn's daughter-in-law for years," she said softly. "I should be here." Jamal looked to Marcus, who sat perfectly still in his chair. "Let them in," Marcus said, his tone carrying neither welcome nor hostility, just certainty. Denise shot him a questioning look. Marcus met her eyes briefly, communicating the same message he had given Jamal at the church. "Wait." Warren cleared his throat once everyone was seated. Per Mrs. Hale's explicit written instructions, this reading is to take place immediately following the service. He adjusted his glasses. "Evelyn established a trust years ago, which holds the majority of her assets. I will begin with a summary, The room settled into expectant silence. Victor had his phone face down on his knee. Simone sat with perfect posture, her expression composed but alert. "The trust contains the following assets," Warren continued, his voice carrying the same measured tone he had likely used in thousands of readings before. "Index fund investments, totaling a significant amount, accumulated over years of consistent contributions." A small sound escaped Simone's throat. Marcus did not look at her. "A fully paid commercial property in Macon, Georgia, currently generating monthly rental income. A substantial amount in a money market account. Another amount in Series E savings bonds." Victor's hand twitched toward his phone. Jamal shifted slightly, drawing Victor's attention and stilling his movement. "Additionally," Warren continued, "there is a life insurance policy with a payout, plus personal property and a vehicle. The total estate value is substantial." The silence in the room became tangible. Marcus could hear the tick of Warren's watch, the soft whisper of paper as he turned to the next page, the controlled breathing of everyone present trying to process what they had just heard. Simone's carefully maintained expression cracked just slightly. A microscopic widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible tension around her mouth. Victor's posture had changed entirely, his spine straightening as calculations visibly ran behind his eyes. "Regarding distribution," Warren said, "the commercial property in Macon transfers to Marcus Jerome Hale outright. The investment accounts are to be divided with the larger portion to Marcus Jerome Hale and the remainder to Denise Hale Mills, with Denise's portion partially held in trust for her children's education." Denise pressed her hands to her mouth, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "The life insurance names Marcus Jerome Hale as sole beneficiary. A portion is bequeathed to New Covenant Baptist Church's scholarship fund. There are additional small bequests to 2 longtime friends, which will be handled separately." Warren gathered his papers with deliberate movements. "Evelyn was very precise in her wishes. She asked me to read one final note aloud." He lifted a single sheet of paper, Evelyn's familiar handwriting visible even from where Marcus sat. "I worked in other people's houses my whole life and watched how they moved money. I just did the same thing. Quiet. Nobody needs to know what you have. Let them think what they want. Marcus, you know what to do." Simone stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Victor's hand moved toward his phone. "Nobody is rushing anywhere," Marcus said pleasantly, his voice filling the room. He turned his head slowly, meeting Victor's eyes directly. "Sit down." The authority in those 2 words seemed to surprise Victor as much as anyone. He sat, his phone remaining untouched on his knee. Warren began organizing folders into his briefcase. "Mr. Hale, shall we schedule our follow-up meeting for morning?" "That works for me," Marcus replied, standing to shake Warren's hand. The attorney's grip was firm, professional. The handshake of a man who had executed his duties exactly as instructed. Later that night, Marcus drove home alone, streetlights casting intermittent shadows across his dashboard. His mother's note from the suit pocket lay on the passenger seat, her handwriting a testament to patience he was only beginning to understand. The morning sun cast long shadows across Evelyn Hale's driveway as Marcus pulled up in his Honda Civic. The modest single-story house sat quiet, unchanged from the outside, white paint still fresh from last year's touch-up. Flower beds still tidy from his mother's final gardening weekend, but it felt different now. It was his house, legally and completely. Marcus sat in the car for a moment, key in hand. Through the windshield, he could see the kitchen window where his mother had been standing when she had her stroke, making evening tea. The paramedics said it had been quick, merciful, no prolonged suffering, just the teacup shattering on the linoleum, and then silence. He walked up the familiar concrete path, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The house smelled of lemon furniture polish and the lingering trace of his mother's favorite vanilla air freshener. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Dishes dried in the rack, reading glasses folded on the coffee table, TV guide open to last week's programs. Marcus moved through the living room, past family photos spanning decades, Him and Denise as children. His high school graduation. The wedding photo with Simone that his mother had never taken down, even after the divorce. Evelyn Hale had been deliberate in everything, including what she chose to display. The master bedroom door creaked softly as he pushed it open. Sunlight filtered through cream-colored curtains, illuminating the carefully made bed with its quilted cover. The closet stood partially open, winter coats pushed to one side despite the Georgia summer heat. Marcus reached past the heavy wool coats, feeling along the back wall of the closet. His hand brushed something solid, a 3-ring binder thick with documents. He pulled it out, recognizing his mother's handwriting on the spine. Records. Important. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Marcus opened the binder. The organization was meticulous, with labeled dividers and clear page protectors. The first section contained bank statements, not Evelyn's, but Simone's. Somehow his mother had obtained copies, tracking unusual spending patterns and noting dates in her precise handwriting. The next section held handwritten accounts of conversations, each dated and detailed. October conversation. Simone asked again about the house deed, said she was just curious about property values in Macon. Another conversation about wills. Third time this year, she has brought it up. Marcus's hands were steady as he turned the pages, but his chest felt tight. Each entry revealed a pattern he had not seen while living it. His ex-wife systematically probing for information about assets, looking for inheritance potential, building a long-term strategy. Then he found the email printout. Evelyn had learned to take screenshots. Denise must have helped her with that. The message was from Simone to a friend, from years into their marriage. His mama has nothing. This was a miscalculation, but I can still work with what he earns. But it was the final section that made Marcus close his eyes briefly. Meeting notes, parking receipts, restaurant bills. A paper trail showing Simone had been meeting Victor Langford for years before filing for divorce. Not after, as Marcus had believed. Not a relationship that developed post-separation. A calculated exit strategy, running parallel to their marriage. Marcus sat in his mother's kitchen, the binder open on the table where she had her last cup of tea. The morning light caught the dust motes floating in the air. He could almost hear her voice. Sit still. Everything I have done is in the black binder. He pulled out his phone and called Warren Klein. The attorney answered on the second ring. Mr. Klein, I need to understand every legal protection around the trust, specifically regarding former spouse claims under Georgia law. Warren's voice was calm, certain. The assets are clean, Mr. Hale, titled correctly, properly documented, protected from any potential claims. Your mother was very thorough about this point in particular. Thank you. Marcus ended the call and immediately dialed Jamal. I need you to pull everything public record on Victor Langford's properties, he said when Jamal answered. Every LLC, every filing, everything in Fulton and DeKalb counties. What am I looking for? Jamal asked. I do not know yet, Marcus replied. But a man who photographs a state attorney contact information at a funeral is looking for a door. I want to know what door he thinks he has found. Marcus gathered the binder and walked out to his car, placing it securely in the trunk and engaging the lock. He stood in the driveway one last time, looking at his mother's kitchen window, remembering her standing there making tea. The next morning, he would meet Jamal and begin piecing together whatever Victor Langford was planning. But for now, he simply stood still, honoring the patience that had built this moment. The Silver Skillet Diner hummed with early morning activity as Marcus slid into the booth across from Jamal. Coffee cups and scattered papers already covered most of the table. Jamal had been here a while, methodically piecing together public records on Victor Langford's business dealings. You want the bad news first, or the worst news? Jamal asked, pushing a cup of black coffee toward Marcus. Marcus wrapped his hands around the warm mug. Give me all of it. Jamal pulled out 3 property documents and laid them side by side. These are all owned by Langford Development LLC. Look at the investor disclosure forms. Marcus leaned forward, scanning the documents. There it was in black and white. Simone Hale listed as a co-investor on 3 separate properties. She put in a substantial amount, Jamal continued, tapping the papers with his pen. Based on the timing, that is got to be from the divorce settlement, which means she invested my money in Victor's projects, Marcus finished quietly. He sat back, letting that sink in. The alimony payments he had struggled to make for years had not gone toward Simone's fresh start. They had gone straight into Victor's business ventures. That is the bad news, Jamal said. The worst news is what I found in Macon. He pulled out another set of documents, these bearing the city of Macon letterhead. Langford Development submitted a preliminary proposal weeks ago for a major redevelopment project. The target property shares a block with Evelyn's building. Marcus studied the proposal drawings. The planned development would encompass the entire block: retail spaces, office suites, parking structure. But the layout made one thing clear. The project was not viable without Evelyn's property. He was not there for Simone, Marcus said softly. He was at the funeral for the property. Man has nerve. I will give him that. Jamal gathered the papers into a neat stack. What is your play? Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to a number Evelyn had saved in his contacts months ago. Lorraine Hayes, commercial attorney. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Lorraine Hayes' office. Miss Hayes, this is Marcus Hale, Evelyn Hale's son. Mr. Hale, I have been expecting your call. Her voice carried the direct efficiency of someone who did not waste words. I assume you are calling about the Langford development situation? What can you tell me? Their representative approached the neighboring property owner weeks ago about a joint development opportunity. Your mother told me last year someone was sniffing around her property. She made it very clear she was not selling to anyone, and that if anything happened to her before she could handle it herself, you would take care of it. Marcus thought of the black binder, of his mother's patient documentation. She was right. He was about to ask Lorraine about zoning regulations when his phone buzzed with another call. Simone's name appeared on the screen. I need to take this, he told Lorraine. Can I call you back in minutes? Of course. Marcus switched lines. Hello, Simone. Marcus. Her voice was warm, careful, the tone she used when she wanted something. I have been thinking about you, about how overwhelming all this must be, the property, the responsibilities. I am managing. Of course you are. A delicate pause. It is just Victor mentioned he might have some ideas about the Macon property. Ways to make things easier for you. Commercial real estate can be so complicated to manage on your own. Marcus watched a waitress refill Jamal's coffee cup. What kind of ideas? Maybe we could all meet, talk through some options. Victor has experience with these situations. He really wants to help. I will think about it, Marcus said evenly. Just think about it. That is all I am asking. Another careful pause. Take care of yourself, Marcus. The line went dead. Marcus immediately dialed Lorraine Hayes back. Miss Hayes, I want to file a formal zoning objection to Langford Development's proposal. As an adjacent property owner, I understand I have standing. You do, Lorraine confirmed. I can have the paperwork ready within days. But are you sure you want to take this step? It will effectively freeze their entire project. Yes, Marcus said, looking at the scattered documents, showing how thoroughly Victor and Simone had underestimated him. I am sure. Jamal was watching him with a slight smile. They really do not know what they are dealing with, do they? Marcus took a slow sip of his coffee. No, he said quietly. They do not. The Macon courthouse steps gleamed in the morning sun as Marcus climbed them alongside Lorraine Hayes. Her heels clicked purposefully against the stone, matching her precise demeanor. Inside her briefcase was the zoning objection they had spent the past days perfecting. The paperwork is comprehensive, Lorraine said as they cleared security. As an adjacent property owner, you have clear standing to challenge their proposed variances. Once filed, this stops their entire timeline cold. Marcus nodded, thinking of Victor's careful positioning at the funeral, his staged sympathy, his quick phone work after photographing the program. How long will the freeze last? minimum months before they can even request a hearing. Then there is the public review process. Lorraine's lips curved slightly. Your mother mentioned you were an engineer. The technical portions of your objection are particularly thorough. They reached the clerk's office, where Lorraine efficiently processed the filing. Marcus watched her stamp each page with practiced precision, thinking of his mother's own methodical documentation. When Lorraine handed him the receipt, he felt a familiar certainty, the kind that came from careful preparation meeting the right moment. From there, they drove to Warren's satellite office in Macon for the second phase of the morning's work. Warren was waiting with fresh lease documents and property assessment forms spread across his conference table. The current tenants are stable, Warren said, reviewing the files. All local businesses, good payment history. Your mother chose them carefully. Marcus spent the next hours signing updated leases and reviewing improvement proposals Lorraine had prepared. New energy-efficient windows for the main retail space, updated security lighting for the parking area, small strategic upgrades that would immediately increase the property's assessed value. These improvements demonstrate clear intent to maintain and enhance the property, Lorraine noted. It creates a paper trail of active management, not passive holding. I am not selling, Marcus said quietly. I am building. Warren nodded with subtle approval, just as Evelyn would have wanted. Back in Atlanta that afternoon, Marcus made 2 careful phone calls. The first was to Angela, one of Simone's closest friends who had hosted their engagement party years ago. The second was to Michelle, who had been Simone's confidant during the marriage's final years. Both conversations were warm, casual, just checking in, sharing memories of Evelyn, catching up on life. But in those natural exchanges, both women revealed what Simone had been saying about the funeral, how she had been there for Marcus in his grief, how Victor had really stepped up when Marcus was struggling to handle everything. The narrative was being carefully constructed. Simone as the supportive ex-wife, Victor as the generous businessman trying to help. Marcus absorbed this information without reaction, adding it to his mental catalog alongside the black binder's content. He was learning that Simone's greatest skill had always been story crafting, building sympathetic narratives that positioned her exactly where she needed to be. His phone buzzed, with a text from Warren late that afternoon. Victor Langford's attorney sent formal inquiry. Property Acquisition Partnership. Responding per your instruction. Marcus pictured Warren's carefully worded reply. Mr. Hale is open to a conversation. He prefers to meet in person. The response came hours later. Victor's team wanted to meet next week. They would bring full proposal documents. They looked forward to exploring mutually beneficial opportunities. Driving home that evening, Marcus called Jamal. He took it, Marcus said when Jamal answered. Meeting next week. Man is desperate, Jamal replied. That objection you filed hit him where it hurts. How you want to play this? Exactly like Mama would, Marcus said, thinking of Evelyn's patient accumulation of leverage, her quiet observation of weaknesses, her perfect timing. Sit still. Let him talk. Then explain exactly how this is going to go. You need me there? No, Marcus said, watching Atlanta's skyline emerge through his windshield. I need you ready for what happens after. The October afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Evelyn's Macon commercial property as Victor's black Mercedes pulled in alongside Marcus's modest sedan. Marcus and Lorraine Hayes stood waiting by the main entrance, watching Victor and his attorney step out with leather portfolios and practiced confidence. Mr. Hale, Victor called out, his voice carrying that same easy tone from the funeral. Good to see you again. He gestured to the man beside him. This is James Morton from Caldwell and Rice. Hope you do not mind us bringing some paperwork to make things official. Marcus nodded once, noting how Victor's suit probably cost more than months of his mother's Social Security check. Lorraine Hayes, he said, introducing his attorney. She has handled this property's affairs for years. They settled into the small conference room Evelyn had used for tenant meetings. The wood-paneled walls held framed photos of the building's original construction and its renovation under Evelyn's ownership. Victor spread glossy presentation materials across the table while his attorney arranged legal documents with practiced efficiency. First, Victor began, let me say how impressed we are with your mother's business acumen. This location is prime for what we are envisioning, and her maintenance of the property has been impeccable. He turned to a rendered sketch of a modern mixed-use development. What we are proposing is a complete transformation of this block. High-end retail, luxury apartments, structured parking, the kind of project that elevates the entire area. Marcus studied the drawings without expression as Victor detailed the offer. Market value plus for the property, equity stake in the development LLC, and first right of refusal on future projects. The numbers were designed to sound generous to someone who had just inherited an unexpected asset. Any questions? Victor asked, settling back with the satisfied air of a man who had just laid out an irrefutable proposition. Several, Marcus said quietly. Your LLC filing shows 3 primary funding sources for Phase 1. What is your contingency if either of the secondary investors withdraws? Victor's smile flickered slightly. Morton shifted in his chair. The neighboring property's current zoning allows 3 stories maximum, Marcus continued. Your renderings show 5. What is your timeline for variance approval? We have excellent relationships with the Planning Commission, Victor said, but his tone had lost some of its polish. And the environmental impact study for the underground parking structure, has that been completed? Given the water table issues this close to the river? Morton was now openly staring at Marcus. These were not the questions of a grieving son looking to liquidate an inherited property. These were the questions of someone who had spent weeks analyzing their entire proposal. I should mention, Marcus said, his voice still conversational, that I filed a formal zoning objection weeks ago. As an adjacent property owner, I have standing to challenge any variance requests. The objection is procedurally clean. Lorraine made sure of that. Victor's face tightened. That can be addressed. The hearing will not be scheduled for months, Marcus continued. My mother's tenants, who have valid leases through the next months, are very interested in attending. They have already contacted the neighborhood association. The conference room went quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Victor's careful facade was cracking around the edges. There is no reason we cannot work this out, Victor said, trying to recapture his earlier smoothness. Everything is negotiable, Marcus stood. Here is what I want. He placed both hands flat on the table, looking directly at Victor. Your LLC withdraws its entire development proposal, in writing, filed with the city within days. I withdraw my objection, and we never have this conversation again. That is not, Victor started. You came to my mother's funeral, Marcus cut in, his voice unchanged, but carrying a weight that filled the room. You sat in the front row. You took pictures of her estate attorney's contact information before she was in the ground. I do not want your money, Victor. I want you gone from Macon. Decide. Morton leaned over and whispered something to Victor. Marcus caught fragments, significant delays, and strong position. Victor stared at Marcus for a long moment, seeing for the first time what he should have seen at the funeral. Not a grieving son to be managed, but a man who had been waiting quietly for exactly this moment. Fine, Victor said finally. Morton will draft the withdrawal. Lorraine will review it before filing, Marcus replied. No hands were shaken. Marcus and Lorraine gathered their materials and walked out together into the late afternoon sun, leaving Victor and Morton sitting in Evelyn's conference room, surrounded by their useless presentations and carefully crafted proposal. The November morning sun filtered through Lorraine Hayes' office windows as she handed Marcus the city's official acknowledgement of Victor's development proposal withdrawal. The single sheet of paper represented days of careful legal maneuvering, but its message was simple. Victor Langford's LLC had formally abandoned all plans for the Macon block. Clean and complete, Lorraine said, settling back in her chair. No conditions, no reservations. They are gone. Marcus nodded, reading the document carefully. His mother had taught him to verify everything himself, even when working with people he trusted. The withdrawal was exactly what they had demanded, unconditional and irrevocable. His phone buzzed, a text from Jamal. "You need to see this." Attached was a screenshot of a business news alert. Victor's LLC had just lost 2 major funding commitments for their development pipeline. The Macon project had been positioned as the cornerstone of a larger regional expansion strategy. Without it, the whole structure was wobbling. "Looks like Mr. Langford did not have a backup plan," Lorraine observed, reading the alert over Marcus's shoulder. Before Marcus could respond, his phone lit up with Simone's name. He let it ring through to voicemail. Minutes later, she called again and again. On the 4th call, he answered. "How dare you?" Simone's voice was sharp with fury. "You had no right to do what?" Marcus asked quietly. "You know exactly what. My investment in that project is gone because I made decisions about my mother's property," he finished, his tone unchanged. "I'm sorry your investment did not work out." "Do not patronize me," she snapped. "How did you even know about the deal? Have you been watching me?" Marcus said nothing. "Answer me. I do not owe you explanations anymore, Simone." He kept his voice level. "Good luck with your next investment." He ended the call as she was starting another demand. Lorraine raised an eyebrow. "That sounded pleasant," she said. "It was necessary," Marcus replied. He looked down at the withdrawal notice again. "What is next?" Lorraine smiled and pulled out another folder. "Actually, I have someone I would like you to meet. LaQuisha Wilson. She runs Savory Soul Catering. They have outgrown their current kitchen space, and they are looking for something exactly like what we have. She has built her business from scratch over years, has excellent financials, and she is exactly the kind of tenant your mother would have appreciated." Marcus opened the folder, reviewing LaQuisha's business plan and financial statements. The numbers were solid. More than that, the progression showed the kind of patient, disciplined growth his mother had always respected. "She needs more square footage than our current configuration," Lorraine continued. "But if we renovate the east wing, nothing structural, just updated equipment and better flow, we could accommodate her operation and actually increase the property's value. The money market account your mother left would more than cover it." Marcus studied the proposed lease terms. The monthly income would jump with annual escalators built in. But it was not just about the numbers. This was the kind of business his mother had always wanted to support. Black-owned, woman-led, built on work rather than connections. "Let us meet," he said. The meeting happened that afternoon. LaQuisha arrived prepared with sample menus, press coverage, and clear plans for expansion. By the end of the week, they had terms both sides felt good about. Marcus authorized the renovation from the money market account, and Lorraine's contractor began work immediately. Weeks later, Marcus stood in the newly renovated East Wing, running his hand along the fresh paint. The updated kitchen equipment gleamed under new LED lighting. The floor plan flowed exactly as LaQuisha had envisioned it. Through the windows, he could see the parking lot his mother had repaved every year without fail. He walked slowly through the space, seeing it the way Evelyn must have when she first bought it. Not just as a building, but as a foundation. Something built quietly, meant to last. Each decision she had made, from the initial purchase to the maintenance schedule to the tenant mix, had been about sustainability rather than flash. Marcus stopped at the window, watching the late afternoon light play across the brick exterior. His mother had understood something fundamental about power. It did not need to announce itself. It simply needed to endure. The call from Denise came on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus was reviewing structural plans at his office when his phone lit up with her name. "You need to hear this," Denise said without preamble. "Simone has been making calls. Aunt Marie, Cousin Sharon, half the church circle, anyone who might listen. She's spinning this whole story about how you froze her out after the divorce, would not let her be there for you during Mama's passing." Marcus set down his pen. "What exactly is she saying?" That you blocked her from properly grieving Mama. That the way you handled the estate was cold and suspicious. She's trying to get ahead of people doing the math, Marcus. She knows everyone knows about the inheritance now, and she is building this whole victim narrative before anyone can think too hard about what really happened. Marcus looked at his watch. Text me her address. What are you going to do? Have a conversation. You want me to come with you? No. This needs to be just us. The drive to Simone's Buckhead apartment took minutes in afternoon traffic. Marcus spent it in complete silence. The black binder sitting on his passenger seat like a loaded weapon. He had not opened it since finding it in his mother's closet. He had not needed to. Every document, every note, every piece of evidence was already burned into his memory. Simone's building had controlled access, but someone was leaving as Marcus arrived, and he caught the door before it closed. The elevator ride to the 6th floor gave him time to center himself. His mother's voice came to him. Dignity is demonstrated, not declared. He knocked on apartment. When Simone opened the door, surprise flickered across her face before she could control it. She had not expected this. Him showing up unannounced, standing quietly in her doorway. For a moment, he saw her recalculating, trying to find the angle that would let her manage whatever was about to happen. Can I come in? Marcus asked. I think we should talk. She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was smaller than their old house, but still carefully decorated. Simone's taste had always run to appearances. Marcus sat down on her leather sofa, placing the black binder on the glass coffee table between them. What is that? Simone asked, taking the chair opposite him. Everything, Marcus said simply. He opened the binder to the first tab. My mother kept records, Simone, of everything. Starting in the 2nd year of our marriage, when you first started asking her about her finances, Simone's face tightened slightly. She documented every conversation where you probed about property, about her will. She had help getting bank statements. I'm guessing from Denise, though she never said. And she had this. He turned to a printed email from you to your friend Karen. His mama has nothing. This was a miscalculation. Marcus, I am not finished, he said quietly. She knew you met Victor years before you filed for divorce. She knew about the affair before I did, and she knew exactly why Victor came to her funeral. It was not about grief or support. It was about the Macon property his development needed. He looked directly at her. I knew about the affair too, by the way, before the divorce. I said nothing and used it as leverage during settlement negotiations, just like I knew exactly what I was doing when I told Victor to walk away from Macon. Your investment loss was not bad luck. It was a consequence. Simone started to speak. Marcus held up his hand. My mother cleaned other people's houses her entire life. She watched. She learned. She built something substantial without ever announcing it, and you sat in the front row of her funeral, thinking she was nothing. He closed the binder. I am not here for an apology. I do not want one. I am here to tell you that I am done. Not angry done. Done? Done? And I am telling you to your face because you should know that what happened to your investment, what is happening to Victor's reputation in the city, none of it is an accident. It is all a result. Marcus stood, picking up the binder. Stop calling my family. Whatever story you're trying to tell, stop telling it. Because if it continues, I will have conversations of my own with people who were at that funeral. With people who saw what Victor photographed. I have been patient. Do not test how long I can stay that way. He walked to the door, opened it, and stepped through without looking back. The click of it closing behind him was very soft. The elevator arrived empty. Marcus rode down floors in silence, the binder tucked under his arm, his mother's lesson complete. Power moves quiet. The morning sun warmed Marcus's coffee mug as he sat on the small porch of his mother's Macon house. His house now, though he still thought of it as hers. It was early October, and the air had that particular Georgia crispness that made everything feel cleaner somehow. From down the block, he could hear the bustle of Saturday morning prep work at Jasmine's kitchen, the catering business that had taken over the commercial space. The sound of delivery trucks backing up, kitchen staff calling out to each other, the metallic clang of sheet pans being unloaded. It was the noise of something growing, something his mother would have appreciated. Marcus took another sip of coffee, letting the familiar creaks of the porch swing remind him of Sunday afternoons watching Evelyn work in her garden. That garden was still there, though he had simplified it some, kept the roses she loved, added some easier care plants that could handle his every other weekend attention. The yard was not quite what it had been under her care, but it was loved. That felt important. His phone buzzed. A text from Denise with a photo of her eldest, Tamara, moved into her dorm room at Spelman College. The first disbursement from Evelyn's education trust had come through right on schedule last month. In the picture, Tamara was beaming, surrounded by new bedding and command-stripped photos on cinderblock walls. She had Evelyn's smile. Marcus texted back a quick heart emoji, something he had never done before the past year, and set his phone down. The morning paper lay folded beside him, and he had been avoiding the business section. Not because it bothered him, but because he had read enough about Victor Langford's financial restructuring when the story first broke months ago. The Atlanta Business Chronicle had not devoted much space to it, just a brief piece about overextended assets and underliquidated holdings. The kind of dry financial reporting that masked the human cost of ambition meeting reality. Victor's LLC had filed for reorganization after the Macon withdrawal triggered a cascade of investor pullbacks. Sometimes a single broken piece could collapse an entire structure. Marcus knew that better than most. It was literally his job. Lorraine's assistant had seen Simone at Marcel in Westside Provisions last week, dining alone. She had looked tired, the assistant said, though she had maintained the careful appearance she had always prioritized. Marcus had not asked for this information. It had simply arrived, the way information tended to in small southern cities, where everyone knew someone who knew someone else. He had not heard from Simone directly since that day in her apartment. Neither had Denise or any of the aunts, uncles, or church friends she had been calling before his visit. The story she had been crafting had died quietly, like a fire running out of oxygen. The sound of tires on gravel announced Jamal's arrival. Marcus watched his cousin navigate the familiar driveway, parking in the same spot he had used since they were teenagers, sneaking Evelyn's car out for late-night crystal runs. "You eating out here?" Jamal called as he climbed out, carrying what looked like a paper bag from the barbecue place on Cotton Avenue. "Where else?" Marcus gestured to the porch table, his mother's table, solid oak, weathered by years of Sunday dinners and Wednesday Bible studies. They settled in with their food, the familiar rhythm of family lunch falling into place. Jamal had brought Brunswick stew and cornbread, still hot. Marcus provided cold sweet tea in Evelyn's mason jars. "You know what I was thinking about this morning?" Jamal asked between bites. "What is that?" "That binder. You ever going to tell me everything that was in there?" Marcus considered the question, stirring his stew. "Most of it." "But not all of it?" "Some things need to stay quiet." Jamal nodded, understanding. She was something else, was not she? Aunt Evelyn? "Yeah," Marcus said softly. "She was?" He looked out past the porch railing to the garden she had tended so carefully for decades. The roses were having a second bloom, deep red against the aging fence. Beyond them lay the vegetable beds where she had grown collards and tomatoes, the fig tree she had nursed through transplants, the patch of land she had worked while watching the neighbors' wealth flow past her front gate. She had cleaned their homes, observed their habits, noted how they moved their money. And all the while she had been building something of her own. Not just the trust or the property, but a complete understanding of what was coming and what Marcus would need to handle it. The binder had not just been evidence, it had been preparation, protection, a way to ensure her son could face what was coming without losing himself to anger or bitterness. She had seen everything, documented everything, and waited for the moment when he would need to know. Marcus folded his hands on the oak table, feeling the warmth of the morning sun and the depth of the quiet. His mother had protected her entire life. He was not angry. He was not waiting for anything. He was, for the first time in years, exactly where he was supposed to be. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you do not miss the next story. I have picked out 2 more for you that I think you will really like.